JJ, you grew up making films on the Super 8 camera. You also grew up loving the films of Steven Spielberg. And now you are making a movie called Super 8 with Steven Spielberg. And is that like a total coincidence?
Is it a coincidence?
Is that a coincidence?
It's sort of a dream come true, honestly. The strange thing, this is a weird story. When I was 16 years old, Matt Reeves Matt directed Cloverfield, and we created Felicity together. Matt and I were in a Super 8 film festival in LA, and the LA Times wrote a story about it that came out the next day, and we got a phone call that day from Steven Spielberg's assistant, who at the time was Kathy Kennedy, and she said, Steven made films when he was your age, and they're damaged. The splices are sort of coming off, little tape splices. Would you guys be interested in repairing them? And Matt and I were like, yeah, we got finals, but we could probably also repair Steven Spielberg's movies. And they said, oh, great, we'll drop them off. So someone comes and drops off these two original films, Firelight and Escape to Nowhere, that Steven Spielberg made when he was a kid. And these are the original, there are no copies, these are the original movies. And it says on the film, which of course we watched them, it says written and directed by Steve Spielberg. And I was like, Matt, we must take a frame of this, we have to. He's like, no, we can't do that, they'll know. So we didn't steal it. And anyway, a lot of almost theft in my childhood. So we repaired these movies, and they were shot on regular 8, not Super 8, and we like peeled off every splice and put it back on, and it was just watching these movies that he made, it was insane, and it was just so inspiring. And I had no idea why this was happening. It felt like a complete joke, because isn't there a building somewhere at Universal that's designed to house the team that restores Steven Spielberg's films that he made when he was a kid? So we repair these movies, and they pick them up, they give us $300, and that's when I knew why they had us do it. But anyway, so years later, this is a couple years ago, I called Steven and I said, I have an idea for a movie called Super 8, and I just sort of pitched him, and he was very excited about it because I knew, having, in a weird way, worked on those movies, you know, I had a sense of sort of what he had done when he was a kid.
What can you say about Super 8? Is this also the case a little too soon, or can you say?
I think it's way too early. I mean, I would love to, show you footage, but we haven't shot any. My favorite thing about the movie, though, is that someone, will go to the theater and see the trailer and hopefully say, "Oh my God, that looks bitchin'," and have no idea they're starring in it.
Yeah.
So we're shooting in September. We haven't shot the movie yet.
And what has been the collaboration like been with Steven so far? I mean, has that been...
It's unbelievable. It really is surreal. And because there is a genre element to the movie, it's impossible to work with him and not constantly reference the work he's done. And you don't want to sound like you're being a sycophant, but it's been incredible. And he's been beyond helpful. And the movie is, I think, very much in the spirit of some of the Amblin films that he made years ago. So it is a dream come true, and I couldn't imagine working on something that was more sort of personal and also kind of hyper real. It's not like the movie is some kind of autobiography, but there's a lot of stuff in it that feels very personal.
Will a film called Super 8 be in 3D?
No.
No? Interesting. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Let's talk about 3D filmmaking, because that's been a big storyline in movies this year. Are you guys fans of the current 3D? I mean, do you like 3D as a movie-going experience, and as movie makers, but as moviegoers?
Honestly, I'm totally into it. I love it. I really think the technology is really good. It kind of puts you in the space. It doesn't give me a big headache. And I think that it's being done so much now that we're past the eat the pancake, sort of poke things at the screen era of 3D, and you can just sort of, it just adds a little something. There are definitely movies where, that shouldn't be in 3D, I don't know, like Cabin in the Woods, or... Although I was watching Once Upon a Time in the West, I was like, this might be okay in 3D. It's all about space.
The thing that drives me crazy about 3D, though, is when you put the glasses on, everything just gets dim. Like it all feels a little sort of gray and muted, and I feel like I want to see the vibrant, I want to see the movie, and I feel like you get into it, but for me it always has that, my brain adjusts to it after a while, but it always has those first few minutes are always like, oh wow, this seems like less than, the experience, like an IMAX experience to me, which is my favorite kind of experience because it's so, immersive. But the 3D thing for me, I'm not totally on board yet, but I'm sure it's too late for me. So.
I mean, as storytellers, are there any opportunities that are you writing to 3D in any way in your current projects?
Writing 3D?
Writing to 3D with 3D in mind.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. There's definitely no. And then the sharp thing comes right at him. The thing is, if you're making an action movie, 3D, it lends itself to that anyway. Things are going to come at the screen. Things are going to, you're going to want to get that sense of space. You're going to want to get that sense of where they are and how they're coming at each other. It's going to be that kind of experience anyway. It's going to work in 2D. The movie has to work in 2D. Most people will see it that way. So you just you'll take it into account ultimately when you're framing, but I don't think it doesn't really change the way I shoot. There are a few things. You want, a sort of a sense of, depth of field where you get, that you get with the shorter lenses or wider lenses. I like those anyway. You don't cut as much because, it messes up the eye a little bit. I like that anyway. We want things to be coming to people so it's exciting. I also like that. So it hasn't changed anything except it's going to make it harder to shoot.
Years ago, I was in New York and I was kind of a little sick and it was late at night and I turned the TV on. I wasn't feeling very well and I was switching the channels and this movie came on. There was about a bunch of young adults and they were acting really weird and they were like, they were really scared about something, but like it kept doing these weird jump cuts and I had no idea what they were scared of, and then they would like offer someone something. They'd be like, here, do you want some food? And they push right out, and the person was like, sure, thanks. And they take it. I was like, what the hell? And there was like, they were talking about like these romantic scenes that didn't exist. And I realized it was Friday the 13th 3D with no 3D, no violence, no sex. Everything was cut out. And it was actually better.
Joss, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned Cabin in the Woods. Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about why the 3D kind of conversion came about, and when are we going to see this film?
I'll answer the second question first. The fate of the studio that has the movie is in flux. Therefore, they've put James Bond on hold, and I don't think we come before him. So we really don't know what. The film is finished. The 3D thing came because they looked at the schedule and said, oh my God, every horror movie is going to be 3D forever for the next few years, and so we should convert it now. That, by the way, may still happen. But Drew shot something very specifically in, a classical mode. Like he went away from really in your face and tried to keep things sort of, he was studying John Carpenter and really keep the suspense and make it almost a little old-fashioned. So what we're hoping to do is be the only horror movie when we come out that's not in 3D, so that we can advertise 2D. You'll believe things can move across the screen. Cabin in the Woods, it's painterly. It's going to revolutionize the industry.
Last question about 3D for you guys, which is, do you think that this is just a fad, or do you think it's kind of really changing the way we're going to see movies? It's changing the way maybe that like young kids go to the movies or what they expect from film? Is it here to stay, do you think?
I have no idea.
You have no idea?
I don't. I really don't. My guess is that it will continue. The equipment will be there. The technology will get better. It will continue. Not everything will be made in 3D, but a lot will. I have no idea.
I don't think it's a fad. And I do think it is kind of extraordinarily immersive when it works. But everything is always going to be built for a zillion different platforms, and many of them are simply not going to be 3D. So it's going to be there, but it's not going to like take over completely. Watch it. 3 years from now, my phone will be like, oh.